Hi class, today we're going to talk about chapter 9, the first cities in India from the story of the world. In this video, we'll be reviewing chapter 9, talking about the Harappan Civilization and the end of the Harappan Civilization. So let's start with your review. In chapter 9.1, the river road, you learned about why ancient people live near rivers. Obviously, we all need water to survive. People were also using it to water their crops. And they were using the rivers to travel and therefore trade with people that were, living further away from them than they could get by walking or by a cart or something like that. And this is where you learn that the Mesopotamians were trading with the people in India. So in India, people were settling around the Indus River, which you can see a picture of right here. They were using the Indus River much like a road. The area around the Indus River was called the Indus Valley, and the reasons people were settling in the Indus Valley, again, were for water and to fish and to water their fields and, again, sail up and down the river to trade. So the civilization that sprung up in this area was known as the Harappan Civilization. They learned to trade with the Mesopotamians. They built cities near the Indus River. They were strongest between 2000 and 1750 BC. And unlike Egypt and unlike Mesopotamia, they were independent cities. They were not united under one strong leader. We also learned that the people in the Indus Valley grew grain, cotton, and fruit like melons, and they used elephants and water buffalo to help them with these tasks. And then in chapter 9.2, the mystery of Mohenjo Daro, you learn about the cities. The cities in the Harappan Civilization were very similar. They had citadels, which you can see a picture of, you can see in this picture right here. They had mud brick houses, wells, toilets, drains, and public baths. Mohenjo-Daro was the largest city, and it had over 40,000 people living in it. So what happened to the Harappan Civilization? Around 1750 BC, people began to leave, and we have no idea why, because we haven't deciphered their writing yet. Yeah, it's really interesting and really fascinating, and I think this is one of the most just interesting topics to study in ancient history. So we're going to start with the origin story of India. So before the Harappan Civilization, before all of this happened, Indians' mythology or history, however you want to view this, was that the first king of India was named Manu Vavaswata. I hope I'm saying that right. So before Manu, there were 6 semi-divine kings. So 6 kings who were part gods. Each of them were named Manu, and each ruled for more than 4 million years. So technically, Manu is still ruling right now. So the 7th Manu was warned by a fish of the coming flood, and after the flood, he becomes the first historical king of India. You can see a picture of it here, where with Manu and his, I think, 7 wise men or something like that, who were in this boat. The beginning of India, or the beginning of this time period with Manu, is said to be 3102 BC. Now this is a very precise date that was decided through a lot of backdating of things. This date is questionable because of that reason, because it's so precise, but it is one that's often used, so for our purposes, we are going to use it. So what was happening during this time when Manu was or wasn't ruling? So nomads were settling in the Indus Valley. They were building houses near the river. There were villages turning into towns. 2-story houses were being built. People were using clay pots and copper tools. So this is really similar to what was happening in the Fertile Crescent some thousands of years before this. Also, if you noticed with the first king and the flood story, that's really similar to the Sumerian king list, how they had kings before that were ruling for these crazy amounts of time, and then the flood happens, and then something changes and shifts. So just something interesting to point out. So then we have the Harappan Civilization. Susan Wise Bauer says, in the 700 years between Manu, Vishnu, and Sargon, the villages along the Indus had turned into a network of cities. So we have Manu at 3102 BC and Sargon at 2334 BC. And so in between this time, we have these villages turning into cities. So just a quick overview of the Harappan Civilization. So archaeologists have found city ruins. They found seals to identify goods traded. You can see pictures of right here. And we can see that they have some sort of a writing system because there have been short inscriptions found. However, like we said before, it's not deciphered yet, so we can't read them. So who did the Harappans trade with? So there's Harappan seals that have been found in from Sargon's time. So clearly they were trading with the Mesopotamians, and a trading post has also been found in Elamite territory. So they were trading with the Elamites as well. So before we go to the next slide, we're going to be talking kind of topically today and not chronologically like we typically do. So to start with that, Susan Wise Bauer says, of the Harappan civilization, with an effort of imagination, we can people them with faceless artisans, merchants, and laborers, but the Harappan civilization has no recorded battles, sieges, power struggles, or tales of heroes. This may not bother anthropologists or archaeologists particularly, but it annoys the historian to no end. We have history complete with approximate dates, cities, industries, and art, John Key complains, but absolutely no recorded events, and barring some not very helpful bones, no people. No clay tablets, texts written on papyrus, or any other example of record keeping exists in the Harappan ruins. So basically she's saying that, remember when we talked about prehistory and history, how prehistory, we don't have a story emerging, and that's kind of what this is with the Harappan civilization. We don't have people because we don't have their writing deciphered. We don't have like really interesting personalities like Gilgamesh and Urzababa and Sargon and Shamshi-Adad arising from their history. And like she says, this annoys the historian to no end. So that's why we're going to be talking topically about some characteristics of the Harappan civilization, and we can't really talk chronologically about certain events that happened. So before we do that, here are some artifacts found. This statue of this man that you can see right here was found in the Harappan civilization, one of the cities, and we don't know if he was a king, we don't know if he was an important person or a man, we don't know. We assume that obviously since there was a statue made of him, he was important. You can see there's some pottery, some of their writing, and their jewelry. So let's talk about the cities. So two of the largest cities were Mohenjo Daro and Harappa. At first, scholars thought it's just these two cities, but since then, 70 other Harappan cities have been discovered, and the Harappan civilization spanned over 500,000 square miles. That's how much mileage, that's how much acreage or territory the Harappan civilization took up. Water systems. So water in the Harappan cities, I think this is really cool. It's very advanced for their time. They had a gutter and drainage system in for wastewater, and you can see like in this picture right here how they were draining things out of their houses in their cities. Like that's so cool. Their houses have bathrooms. Obviously, these drainages were used for that. They also had a very large bath, and you can see in this picture right here in their cities, and there's small chambers surrounding these large baths, possibly for getting dressed or undressed, and clearly they valued cleanliness. Clearly, just staying clean was very important to them. But we don't know why. Maybe they were just a culture that valued cleanliness. Maybe it had something to do with their religion, but we don't know anything about their religion because no temples have been found in the Harappan cities. So again, just very interesting and fascinating and unusual. So let's talk about some of the city features. So in each of the cities, there is a citadel, which is a high section of the city. You can see right here and right here. And the citadel was typically surrounded by walls and watchtowers. And the citadels were used for when or if a wall, the walls around the city were breached, the people could retreat into the citadels to keep them safe. So we have to wonder, with all of their walls around their cities and then their citadels and their watchtowers, who were they afraid of? You don't do something like this unless you're really afraid of getting attacked. So the Sumerians and the Elamites didn't send their armies this far, so they obviously had all of their own stuff going on. So it wasn't them. There's no evidence of savage nomad tribes around them. So maybe they were afraid of people like themselves. They've found, archaeologists have found ruins of towns underneath the Harappan cities, multiple Harappan cities. So there would be a town and then it was like destroyed and then Harappan cities built on top of that. So maybe these Harappan cities weren't just built organically, they went and took over people who were already living in certain towns and they built their cities, and they were afraid that there were people like themselves out there who maybe wanted to get back at them or come in and do what they had done themselves. The Harappan cities now were so interesting because they are so similar, and I'm going to read this quote to you and you can decide for yourself what you think about them. Are they OCD? Are they very particular? Like what is this? So Susan Wise Bauer says, even across 500,000 square miles of settlement, the Harappan cities are remarkably similar. The general plan of the cities was the same, with the citadel separate from the sprawl of houses and shops, and always to the west. The houses and shops, or lower village, were organized around carefully planned streets. Depending on the level of traffic they were expected to bear, they were designed as main arteries, inevitably 24 feet wide. Streets, 18 feet wide, or 3/4 of a width of the arteries, or side lanes, 12 feet, or half the width of the artery. Like, that's so cool. They ran inevitably directly north-south or east-west in a planned grid pattern. The cities used standardized weights, which was not unusual as Sargon's Akkadian Empire and the Egyptians had begun to move in the same direction. What is a little weirder is that the standardization also extended itself to the mud bricks used for buildings, which begin to conform to exactly the same dimensions in centimeters, 17.5 times 15 times 30. So John Key in The History of the Ancient World calls this obsessive uniformity. And it makes me wonder why they were like this. Was it what part of their culture or their worldview made them want to be so obsessively uniform about how they built things? This was to the extent that even their building tools and their kits are standardized. So like imagine a toolbox, like having a little kit and it's the same. It's so fascinating. So how did they do this? How over this 500,000 square miles where cities are separated, how did they figure out, hey, you build your city like me and you build your city like me, and like let's all build our cities the same? Obviously, this would require a lot of communication because the cities, again, are separated, but we don't have these messages. And then the inscriptions that we do have aren't deciphered, so we don't know. There's also no evidence of like a higher up king or someone, again, uniting all of these cities. There isn't any evidence of government leaders or officials because to do a job like that, you probably would need to write a lot more. So I have to guess that there was something in the way they viewed the world that, and something about what they believed that made them live like this and do this. We don't know what it is. And then we have to talk about the end of the Harappan civilization, which is equally as interesting and mysterious as their culture. So this happens around 1750 BC. So what happens to them? So if we look at excavations of Mohenjo Daro and Harappa, there are skeletons lying unburied in the streets. Families are trapped and killed in homes. Like just families have been found in their homes dead together. Houses have collapsed due to fire, and then treasured items like tools, jewelry, silver have been found just dropped on the streets as if people were running away from something. They had taken their treasured possessions and decided, hey, this is weighing us down, we don't need this, and they drop them. So there are a lot of theories out there about what ended the Harappan civilization. One of the more popular ones is that they were invaded and taken over. However, there's no evidence of this happening because there's no dropped weapons. There's no bodies have been found wearing armor. There's also no sign of struggle at the citadel. There's no like skeletons lying as if they were in a battle together. And for a city, for the civilization that had a citadel and walls in every city, you would think that if you were invaded and the walls were breached, everyone would know to go to the citadels, but that's not where they went. So clearly, well, I can't say that. I would like to say clearly they weren't invaded, but people still believe that they were invaded. You can think that if you want. There's a lot of information out there. Look it up. It's really fascinating. Some people think maybe it was an earthquake, maybe it was a flood. The silt traces don't prove that there was a huge flood that happened. So if a huge flood happened, there would be the evidence of that in the layers of the soil. Also, there was an earthquake, or if a flood happened, there would be enough survivors, you would think, that they would rebuild their cities, right? You wouldn't just up and like disappear and leave, but they didn't. So there's a theory that says maybe there was some internal issue going on. Internal rot is what Susan Wise Bauer says, that because the skeletons that have been found have shown illness, possibly anemia, malnutrition. So maybe there was some drought or famine happening. So people were sick, and then a natural disaster happened, maybe like an earthquake or something, and destroyed their city. So there's also really far out there theories like aliens or things like that. But anyway, Harappan civilization ends with this. We don't know what happened. Their writing isn't deciphered. I think it's incredibly interesting and fascinating, and I hope you did too. So that's all I have for you today. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.